Well, Americans pay almost 2.5 times more for prescription drugs than any other developed country. That is according to a study from the RAND Corporation, a nonpartisan global think tank. However, those costs could change. That's because the Biden administration announced that Medicare will start negotiating the prices for 10 drugs, including blood thinners and diabetes medication. These are the first drugs to be negotiated since the Inflation Reduction Act authorized negotiating power to Medicare. And here to explain more about the announcement is Lewis Brown, Executive Director of Christ Medicus. Lewis, great to have you back on. Talk to us more about this and why it's important.
Right. It's very important. Prescription drugs are a vital lifeline for a lot of families that are experiencing very serious medical conditions. It's particularly important as a part of the right to life and human dignity for all Americans that we ensure that folks have access to quality medical care, including prescription drugs. So this is a big issue. I think the intentionality of what the Biden administration is doing is good in the sense of we want to lower costs. We want to make prescription drugs more available to vulnerable Americans, to Americans who have serious medical conditions. At the same time, I think the mechanisms the Biden administration are using to accomplish this laudable goal can be problematic. So there's a lot to go through here. We haven't really seen before the federal government directly negotiate price for prescription drugs. It's essentially price controls, and that can undermine innovation and create other challenges. I think there's a better way to go about it when we can talk about that.
Yeah, and we also mentioned blood thinners and diabetes medication earlier. What are some of the other drugs on the list?
Right, so there's 10 drugs that they're starting out with. It's important to note that these price negotiations, the results of them aren't going to go into effect this presidential term. It'll not happen until the next presidential term, whoever that may be. But these are the drugs that they've listed are drugs that treat everything from heart failure to, as you said, diabetes, blood cancer, work to prevent other things such as stroke. And so these drugs are important. They help a lot of people. I had a family member recently who had a stroke. And so people need access to prescription drug coverage, no doubt about it. But the problem is in engaging in price controls, we're seeing the federal government increasingly control the entire healthcare landscape. What we know as Catholics is a better approach is to put the patient, the family, the individual at the center of the healthcare system and not take control and run our entire federal healthcare system out of Washington. We need to send that power back to the individual, back to the states. I think that's a better way.
Yeah, Lewis, I'm curious about this. In 2020, then President Trump, he signed executive orders to help lower the cost of prescription medications, including Medicare Part B drugs. How is this plan? How is it different from that?
Right. It differs in a couple ways. The primary approach that President Biden announced this week is, again, the federal government directly using its mighty arm to negotiate prescription drug prices with prescription drug companies. What the Trump administration plan did was very different. Same goal, but a different approach. First, it directed federally qualified health centers to pass discounts, lower prices to Americans with lower incomes. It also allowed the federal government and our country and our market to import drugs from Canada and other foreign countries, and looked at other ways of decreasing the prescription drug costs for prescription drugs offered in Medicare Part B. The focus of the Trump administration's executive order, different from the Biden administration, was focused on decreasing prices, increasing, I think, on some level, market competition, really putting the patient in the driver's seat and having a mix of incentives and subsidies to lower prescription drug costs. That's very different from the federal government essentially engaging in price controls. Again, a laudable goal, but I think there's a better way to go about it.
Yeah, almost out of time, but quickly, I understand that your group, Christ Medicus, one of the main tenets is to evaluate public policy and also to engage how it impacts the poor, the sick, vulnerable, and most at risk. That said, what do you think about this specific policy and how beneficial is it?
I think the intention is laudable, but I think it's not going to be as beneficial as the Biden administration would like it to be. What we're focused on at the Christ Medicus Foundation, and you can go to cmfcuro.com, is offering Christ-centered health and wellness programs. We think that these solutions of healthcare cost, of providing for the health and wellness of our country is better focused on giving choices to the patient, to the family, to the person with nonprofit, church and family and market solutions, and then the government stepping in. I think over time, this is going to have a negative effect overall, but we're hopeful.
Louis, thank you so much for coming on and for all your insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
God bless.